In this episode, we take the everyday work of a Security Operations Center, SOC, and connect it to the longer journey of getting better over time in a way that can be planned, explained, and sustained. Many beginners imagine maturity as something that happens naturally if a team works hard and stays busy, but busy teams can remain stuck if they never decide what improvement actually means. Goals are how you define what better looks like, and analytics are how you learn whether you are moving toward it or just moving. The challenge is that goals can be vague and analytics can be noisy, which makes it easy to confuse activity with progress. A maturity plan is the bridge between today's reality and tomorrow's capability, and it requires goals that are specific enough to guide decisions and analytics that are meaningful enough to reveal what is changing. When goals and analytics work together, continuous maturity planning stops being a slogan and becomes a practical method. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A useful starting point is recognizing that SOC goals exist at different levels, and the maturity plan must connect them rather than treating them as separate wishes. At the highest level, the organization wants reduced risk, fewer severe incidents, and faster recovery when something goes wrong. At the operational level, the SOC wants earlier detection of real threats, more accurate triage, and more consistent response decisions. At the daily execution level, analysts want workflows that are clear, evidence-driven, and not buried in noise. If you set goals only at one level, you end up with misalignment, such as a dashboard that celebrates ticket volume while leaders wonder why incidents still hurt. Maturity planning ties these levels together by translating broad risk outcomes into operational objectives and then into measurable signals that can be tracked. When you understand this layering, you can set goals that are both meaningful to leadership and useful to the team doing the work. That alignment is what turns measurement into guidance instead of pressure. Before writing goals, it helps to define what maturity means in the SOC context, because maturity is not simply having more tools or more data. Maturity is the ability to detect and respond consistently, with less uncertainty, using repeatable methods that scale without burning people out. A mature SOC is not one that never has incidents, because incidents can happen even with strong security, but it is one that learns and adapts quickly. This definition matters because it shifts goals away from perfection and toward capability growth, such as better coverage of important behaviors, better quality of investigations, and better coordination with other teams. It also keeps you from setting goals that are impossible to prove, like being secure, because those goals do not guide daily choices. When maturity is framed as capability, it becomes something you can plan toward with steps and checkpoints. That is the foundation of continuous maturity planning. Good goals must be specific enough to change decisions, yet flexible enough to survive real-world complexity, which is why vague goals often fail even when they sound inspiring. A goal like improved detection sounds positive, but it does not tell you what to do next week, what to prioritize, or what trade-offs are acceptable. A more useful goal states what type of improvement is needed, where it matters most, and how you will recognize progress in a measurable way. For example, a team might aim to reduce the time between initial suspicious behavior and confident triage for high-impact signals, or to improve coverage for critical identity and privilege behaviors on the most important assets. Even then, you must be careful, because goals can accidentally create incentives that reduce quality, such as encouraging quick closures that hide uncertainty. A well-set goal is paired with an understanding of what good behavior looks like, so people do not game the number. The aim is goals that guide learning, not goals that reward shortcuts. Analytics guide maturity planning when they explain why performance looks the way it does, not just how it looks on a chart. A single metric can shift for many reasons, including threat activity changes, business changes, or data collection changes. So you need analytics that connect observations to causes. That means you do not only track time or volume, but you examine patterns, segment results by severity and category, and look for bottlenecks that consistently slow work down. For beginners, it helps to see analytics as a structured way of asking what is driving what you observe, because that is how you decide which improvement will actually move the goal. If triage is slow, analytics should help you determine whether the cause is noisy alerts, missing context, unclear ownership, or lack of reliable telemetry. When you identify causes, the maturity plan can target the right constraints rather than guessing. This is how analytics becomes a steering wheel for improvement rather than a scoreboard for performance. A maturity plan also needs a realistic baseline, because progress cannot be measured honestly if you do not know where you started. Baseline does not mean an ideal target, and it does not require perfect data, but it does require consistent definitions and repeatable measurement. You need to know what counts as an alert, what counts as an incident, what counts as triage complete, and how time is measured, or your baseline will be unstable. Once you establish baseline, you can compare changes over time and separate true improvement from measurement noise. A baseline also reveals which goals are realistic in the near term and which require foundational work first, such as improving data quality or process clarity. For new learners, this is an important lesson because jumping to ambitious goals without baseline often produces disappointment and blame when numbers do not move. Baselines make maturity planning calmer because they anchor expectations to reality. When you translate goals into measurable indicators, you want a balanced set that captures effectiveness, efficiency, and learning, because maturity is a mix of all three. Effectiveness indicators reflect whether the SOC is finding meaningful threats and reducing harm, such as the quality of detections and the consistency of investigations. Efficiency indicators reflect whether work flows smoothly, such as time spent in key stages and the size of backlogs that signal overload. Learning indicators reflect whether the program is getting smarter, such as the number of detection improvements derived from hunts and incidents, or the closure of known visibility gaps on critical systems. If you track only efficiency, you can optimize for speed and lose accuracy. And if you track only effectiveness outcomes, you can miss early signs of progress during quieter periods. Learning indicators are especially valuable because they show maturity growth even when external threat activity varies. The maturity plan should treat these indicators as a system, where improvements in one area should not damage the others. Balance is how you avoid improving a number while degrading capability. A common mistake is setting SOC goals that depend heavily on teams outside the SOC without building cooperation into the plan. Many improvements require changes in logging, identity practices, infrastructure configurations, or business workflows that the SOC does not directly control. If your plan assumes those changes will happen automatically, you will miss targets and lose credibility, even if the SOC team works hard. A better approach is to set goals that include collaboration explicitly, such as improving handoffs, clarifying ownership for critical assets, and establishing shared expectations for response actions. Analytics can help here by revealing where delays occur due to approvals, access constraints, or unclear escalation, which turns vague friction into specific coordination needs. For beginners, it is useful to remember that maturity is organizational, not just technical, because the SOC operates inside a larger system of people and processes. When the plan acknowledges dependencies, it becomes more realistic and more likely to succeed. That realism keeps momentum strong over multiple improvement cycles. Another key element is choosing goals that reduce uncertainty, because uncertainty is what makes response slow, inconsistent, and stressful. Uncertainty comes from missing telemetry, ambiguous signals, unclear playbooks, and inconsistent definitions of what matters. A maturity plan can target uncertainty directly by setting goals around visibility coverage on critical assets, standardizing investigation workflows, and improving context for analysts so triage becomes faster and more confident. Analytics supports this by showing where analysts repeatedly get stuck, what evidence is often missing, and which alerts require too much manual searching. The improvement actions then become clear, such as improving telemetry collection, enriching signals with asset context, or refining playbooks so key questions are answered in a consistent order. When uncertainty decreases, speed improves naturally without forcing rushed decisions. This is why uncertainty reduction is a strong maturity theme, because it improves both outcomes and team experience. Over time, the SOC becomes more predictable under pressure, which is a practical definition of maturity. Maturity planning also benefits from thinking in short cycles, because long plans that assume stable conditions often fail in dynamic environments. A practical approach is to define a near-term improvement set that can be executed, measured, and refined, then use results to choose the next set. Analytics supports these cycles by showing which changes move the needle and which did not, and it helps you avoid repeating ineffective effort. Short cycles also reduce the risk of overcommitting to a single direction when new threats or business changes emerge. For beginners, it helps to think of maturity as iterative, like repeated polishing of rough edges, rather than as a one-time transformation project. Each cycle should produce an observable capability improvement, such as fewer false positives for a critical detection area, faster triage for high-impact alerts, or stronger verification in containment decisions. When cycles accumulate, maturity becomes real and visible, and the organization gains confidence that improvement is continuous. This is how a plan stays alive rather than becoming a document that is ignored. Setting goals that guide maturity also requires clear ownership and decision rules, because even the best analytics is useless if no one acts on it. Ownership means someone is responsible for interpreting the signals, proposing changes, and coordinating execution across teams. Decision rules mean the team agrees on what thresholds or patterns trigger action, such as sustained backlog growth, repeated incidents with similar root causes, or persistent noise in a detection category. Without decision rules, the SOC can stare at dashboards and still fail to improve because everything feels urgent and nothing is prioritized. With decision rules, analytics becomes an early warning system that triggers focused improvement work. For new learners, this highlights that maturity planning is not passive reporting but active management, where measurement informs decisions and decisions change the environment. The goal is a loop where you observe, decide, act, and re-observe, and that loop must be owned. When ownership is clear, improvement becomes consistent rather than dependent on individual hero effort. Another important maturity planning theme is building trust in metrics so stakeholders believe the story the numbers are telling. Trust requires consistent definitions, stable data collection, and transparency about limitations, because leaders will quickly doubt metrics that shift unpredictably or cannot be explained. A trustworthy SOC measurement approach explains what the metric includes, what it excludes, and why it matters, and it avoids pretending that a single number captures the full truth. Analytics helps by providing context, such as showing that an apparent improvement was driven by a reduction in noise after tuning, or that an apparent decline was driven by a new data source increasing visibility. This honesty matters because maturity planning often requires investment, and investment decisions depend on credible evidence. For beginners, it is useful to remember that measurement is not just internal. It is communication, and communication affects support. When metrics are trusted, they can justify changes that improve visibility, reduce friction, and strengthen detection quality. That support is how a maturity plan moves from intention to execution. A maturity plan should also include explicit attention to resilience and sustainability, because progress that burns out the team is not real progress. If goals push analysts to move faster without reducing noise or improving context, the team will become exhausted and quality will drop, which increases risk. Analytics can reveal sustainability issues through indicators like persistent after-hours load, rising backlog, high rework rates, and reduced time available for improvement work. The maturity plan can then target structural fixes, such as reducing repetitive tasks, improving signal quality, and clarifying playbooks so triage requires less mental effort. This is not about comfort. It is about operational reliability, because tired teams miss signals and make errors. For new learners, this connects the human side of operations to measurable outcomes, which is a core theme in security leadership. When sustainability improves, the SOC can maintain steady performance and continue learning, which is what maturity requires. Planning without sustainability is planning for failure. As goals and analytics mature, the final step is ensuring they translate into a coherent roadmap that evolves based on evidence rather than on habit. The roadmap connects current baseline, prioritized gaps, planned improvements, and expected outcomes, and it stays flexible enough to incorporate new findings from incidents and hunts. Analytics guides roadmap updates by showing where improvements delivered value and where additional work is needed, especially when new patterns emerge. The roadmap should also preserve continuity, so improvements build on each other, such as closing telemetry gaps before expanding sophisticated analytics or stabilizing triage consistency before pushing aggressive time targets. For beginners, it helps to see that maturity is sequencing, because doing the right thing at the wrong time can waste effort. When the roadmap is coherent, each improvement makes the next improvement easier, and the SOC becomes more capable in a compounding way. This compounding effect is what makes continuous maturity planning worth the effort, because capability grows faster as foundations strengthen. In closing, setting SOC goals and analytics that guide continuous maturity planning is about defining what better means, measuring it honestly, and using those measurements to steer repeatable improvements. Goals must align with the mission and avoid rewarding shortcuts, and analytics must explain causes and guide prioritization rather than simply reporting numbers. A baseline provides reality, balanced indicators provide completeness, and collaboration awareness keeps the plan achievable inside the broader organization. When goals target uncertainty reduction, short improvement cycles keep momentum, and clear ownership turns analytics into action. Trustworthy metrics and sustainability-focused planning ensure progress is credible and durable, not fragile and exhausting. Over time, these practices create a learning loop where each cycle improves visibility, consistency, and decision quality, which is the practical meaning of maturity for an SOC. When you can set goals and analytics this way, you build an operating model that improves continuously rather than one that merely reacts.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit BareMetalCyber.com.